To hit record. Okay, good morning, everybody on the line. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Erica Segi with Northumberland CFDC. We're excited today to offer you this webinar that is sponsored by one of our programs, DELIA. DELIA is actually a new program that we've launched, and it's supported by WES, the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy. And basically what it is, it provides loans up to $15,000 on a fintech platform. So instant approval, instant review of a loan up to $15,000 for women-led or women-owned businesses within Southern Ontario. And as part of that program, you will have access to entrepreneurship development items like today, like this webinar series, but then there's some other learning activities that DELIA participants have access to. An 8-week virtual Grow class marketing virtual course with Sarah Stockdale. She's out of Toronto, and that's all virtual. And then Singularity University Canada, also a leadership certificate program. And then access to our virtual mentors as well. So we change those mentors up monthly, dependent on who's part of our cohort and the needs for business development. So that could range from someone like Susan, who we have today, from financial planning. We could offer sales, marketing. We really get to know who's part of the DELIA program and ensure that we have services that meet everyone's needs. So DELIA is bringing today's session today. We're really excited to have Susan Watkin with us today. Thank you, Susan, for joining us. Susan has a broad experience behind her. You know, you're an accounting educator, a business advisor, startup strategist, and you really work closely with all types of businesses, small businesses mainly, at different areas of the growth cycle. And as we were talking about the content for today, obviously in this climate that we're in right now, the economy and the business environment, there's a lot of change happening out there and a lot of unknown of how that will affect you from an accounting standpoint. So we're excited to bring the topic of pivoting your cash flow, financial planning in times of change. And we will be recording this session today. So just note that it will be posted by the end of the week on our Venture 13 website. So if anybody wants to rewatch this or share this with someone they think would get benefit out of it, we'll definitely be sending that out to the attendee list, and it will be posted by end of week. And without further ado, I think I will just pass it over to you, Susan. I will be monitoring the chat box. So if someone doesn't want to speak up with a question and or if they don't want to lose that thought and they want to put that into the group chat, please do that, and I will monitor it and just call it out to Susan if she doesn't see it. And yeah, we'll go from there. So Susan, I'll pass it on to you. I'm just going to make sure everyone's on mute.
Okay.
And welcome to those that just hopped on the line. There's a couple of you. So yes, I'll pass it on to you, Susan. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Okay, great. Thanks, Erica. Do you still see my screen up, Erica, or do I have to reshare that? It's good? Okay, perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And thank you, as always, to the NCFDC. I've been very privileged to do a lot of things with this amazing organization over the last, oh my gosh, 6 years, I think. There's been many things, which I love. And the DELIA project is, of course, a fantastic project for our women-led entrepreneurs, businesses. And I do appreciate them giving me a call and asking me to come and chat. So I'm going to talk today, talk for a bit about financial planning, cash flow for your business. And as Erica said, we're kind of talking about times of change, because obviously we have been in a lot of change lately, but this is not going to be the only change we're probably ever going to see in our business. So it's something that I want to talk about, some high-level concepts, kind of get in there. And I want to specifically say to all of you that if you have questions, please ask them. I'm going to be broaching these subjects from a certain angle, and perhaps you might want me to re-explain it in a different way, or you have a question or you want to have some examples or something, you know, just put that in the chat box and I'm happy to definitely touch on that throughout the webinar. Engagement is great, and it's always nice when you ask questions and I can help you even further. So a little bit about me for you, those who don't know. Erica introduced me so wonderfully, which is very, very nice. But this is me, of course. I own Watkin Small Business Services. It's an organization. I'm located in Cobourg, but I actually work Canada-wide with some of the businesses that I work with. I've been an accounting professional for over 20 years. I actually just authored a textbook, my first textbook, which is kind of crazy. It's an experience that it was very different, but I'm very excited about it. And I've created a specific program right now as well that has been inspired by the work I've done at NCFDC and working with all these amazing startup and growing businesses called Find Our Bookkeeper, helping really connect the businesses with the right type of accounting professionals. So it's very near and dear to me. I have my some contact information up on the screen. You're always welcome to connect with me in this social world, in LinkedIn and Twitter and whatnot. Please feel free. It's always nice to see how businesses are going, and I love to follow the businesses that I'm able to engage with as well to see how you're doing. So enough about me. Let's talk. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we have a couple things. These are some key topics, but our overarching ideas, we're dealing with some cash flow, we're dealing with financial planning. We're going to talk about what these things mean for your business. This webinar is going to be about an hour. Might be less if I talk too fast. It might be more if there's lots of questions, but don't worry, we have the time. And then for those of you that have been able to attend live, as I said, please feel free to ask questions, and then I'll pause periodically to answer them, and I'll probably pause periodically to ask you for questions if you have them. I encourage it. Okay, so today it's about reevaluating, for example, reevaluating your products and service pricing and sales, because this is a big thing that kind of hits us with our financial planning and our cash flow. So that's one of the things we want to talk about today. We're also going to talk about how, if you pivot your business strategy to deal with the change, how that's going to impact your cash flow, right? So, because that is something that will happen and something we have to think about. And then also, how do we plan for cash flow disruption, right? So what can we be doing? What can we be thinking about, for example, when we know that our cash flow, because of whatever's going on, is going to be disrupted? So we're going to talk about, touch on things like that. Okay. So before we get into kind of a little bit more of the specifics, I do want to talk about, financial planning. So what is it? For businesses, for all of us, mine, yours, everybody's, we need a financial plan. And our financial plan is actually based off of our strategic plan. So if you've been building a business plan or doing a business model for yourself, if you're creating a new startup company, or even if you're growing, all of us usually have a strategic plan, or you should have. And the strategic plan is you're figuring out where you are in your business and where you want to be, right? And then you want to be setting goals, and then to get where you want to be, and then you have to be putting in actions in place to get there, right? So it's all this, how do I achieve these goals? So this is kind of like our big strategic plan. And our financial plan works with that strategic plan. It's like, okay, so where you are today financially, where do you want to be? How do we achieve these goals financially? How do we pay for the things that we want to be doing? So, okay, so wait, and if you think about it, for example, I'll give you an example. Maybe you're in a growth phase of your business. Do you need to hire some people? Do you want to expand your location, get new equipment? So all of these things are what you might need to achieve a goal that you've set for your business, okay? And then all of those things cost money. So we want to have a financial plan so that we can achieve those goals. So think about that when you're thinking financial planning, strategic planning. Where am I in, and where am I today, and where do I want to be? All right. So defining your short and long-term financial goals for your business. Okay, so when you set your goals, you want to be prioritizing them. You want to make the plans to achieve them. And this especially means setting timelines. Okay. You want to create these action plans to carry out. And then you have to think about, now, what are these costs that are going to be associated to put these plans in motion? Are there various stages of this planning that we want to be doing, right? So you want to be thinking about that. So that you have to put them in a priority sequence, because we can't achieve everything at one time. So you want to decide what is most important for you. What is something you want to be doing right now? So, set your goals, set those short-term, long-term goals. You can even have mid-range goals as well. And then you want to figure out, okay, what is it going to take me to achieve it? And then financially, what is it going to take me to achieve it? Okay. So budgeting, for example, is one of the things that does help you. It's very important to be doing as part of your financial plan. This is with budgeting. You could be budgeting for a project plan, a specific action plan. It's managing your expenditures. It's helping you achieve that goal while maintaining control over the finances, okay? So creating that budget for your financial plan is very important, because you want to be monitoring those overruns so you can get ahead of any problem before it becomes too difficult to fix, right? So it's better to monitor something as it is ongoing right now than to come back in 6 months and say, what happened? Where did this get derailed? Okay. Financial plans are not something that we just set and forget. These are things that you have to monitor over time, okay? Because there are going to be things that come in and shake the trees on this, all right? Now, when we think about financial projections, what a financial projection is, it's allowing you to look ahead, and you're going to work through some anticipated sales, anticipated expenditures. You're going to be forecasting into the future, and you're going to be thinking about things like your seasonality. When is your busy period? When is your slow period? When do you have to plan for things in terms of, in preparation for a busy season? So for those that where in retail, Christmas time, the holidays becomes a very busy season, but they don't plan for that in the same month that the busy part occurs, right? So what they're looking at is months ahead, so they're forecasting, okay, I need to be planning ahead of those busy days, those busy times, because this is where we're going to be planning for our costs in terms of things like advertising. Maybe we need to bump up our inventory. So that is all done ahead of time. Okay. So often those projections before there's this huge boost in sales, you might have a higher expenditure there. And this is going to help you by planning this. You're going to be able to see kind of what's going on for, I don't know, 3, 6, 12 months down the road. And what it's going to help you do is it helps you not only with the financial planning, but it's helping you manage your cash flow at the same time, because you're going to be seeing, what is you are anticipated to sell, but then also you're going to consider when money is going to be coming in. So some of the things that I find in particular that a lot of businesses, especially new businesses, forget about when we're thinking about planning and forecasting is we're forgetting the things that are not technically expenses, but cost us money. So, and when I talk about things like that, this is something like paying sales tax. So if you're collecting and remitting HST, well, that's above your sales, right? So this is not something that is sitting, in your financial statement that you're going to, have there. It's not an expense you get to write off. It's something that you've collected over and above that you've had to put aside. And now there's going to come a point where you're going to have to send that money off to the government. Okay. So what will happen then is that you have to make sure that you're looking ahead in that sales projection. You're looking those 3-6 months and seeing, when does that sales tax become due? I better remember that I'm going to need that extra money in those days. Okay. So, and then also some of the other ones are debt repayment. excuse me. So again, debt repayment is not an expenditure. This is something that is lowering a pre-existing debt, but it hits the bank account, right? So you want to be making sure that, you're planning for your cash and the cash going out, when those debt repayments are due. Okay. So these are often forgotten. And will wind up leaving people really tight in their cash flow when it's not planned for. Okay, so you want to really consider all of those situations. Then we look at what else is part of financial planning. Well, it's cash flow, and we just kind of talked about this. And our cash flow is our, we're securing our financing when it comes to our financial planning. So maybe we need financing to be able to get that new building or buy all that new equipment to achieve that goal of growth that we're looking for. We want to be staying ahead of our receivables. So we want to be watching for those customers that are really slow to pay us and really keeping up on that. Don't let your collections fall behind, because it's going to hurt you at the end, because you're going to find all of a sudden you don't have any money in the bank, and we don't want that. We want to be looking at our spending. So tightening our belts on the, on the expenses, maybe stretching out even some debt repayment, looking at other options when it comes to the financing that you have secured and how much and how often you have to repay that. So this is how we want to use our financial planning with our cash flow, is like controlling this. Okay. And then of course we want to be monitoring this. You'll spot the issues as I said, and then have a contingency plan. This is one thing that I think we're told this a lot in our personal lives, as well as, make sure you have money if you ever lose a job, you want to have a savings, and the same goes for your business. Do you have a contingency plan if something goes a little bit wonky? And 2020 is a really good example of a real hit that we probably all took to our strategic and financial planning for our business. And as I did, and I know from experience and seeing people, a lot of people did not have a contingency plan in place. So it's something that you want that to be a part of your planning, of your strategic planning, and then of course of your financial planning, because it has to do with money. So that's kind of like an overview of, financial planning. So again, as I said, if there's any questions, please post them, and I'm happy to retouch on a topic that I've kind of gone over, because I don't want to miss the mark with you guys. I want to make sure this is being very useful for you. So next, before we get into some more specific points, is I kind of wanted to do a review on what cash flow is. Okay, so a lot of people, I think we have a good concept of, okay, well, what is cash flow? Well, it's the flowing of cash. Literally, it is the flowing of cash, money, cash equivalents. And since it is a huge part of our financial plan, I want to kind of address this, straight off. All right, so we have typically 3 types of cash flow. And most businesses, for many of us, we're really, it's the operational cash flow that's really important to us. Okay, this is the money that the cash is directly flowing in and out of our business. So money coming in from our sales, money going out for our expenditures. So this is our operational cash flow. Another one that's really important that a lot of businesses will see is the financing cash flow. When I talk about financing cash flow, this is when you've received cash through debt, right? So when we just talked about financial planning, we talked about securing financing. So if one of your goals that you've created in your strategic plan is going to require you to, buy, tens of thousands of dollars in machinery, well, that's likely going to require you to get financing. So then financing now becomes a debt for you, and this is money coming in via debt. So this is called, this is our financing cash flow. Okay. Now, one that some businesses have as they get bigger, you might have it already, I don't know, is the third one is investing cash flow. And this is usually when we're earning money via the investments that we've made in a business and or money going out because of what we have spent in terms of investing. But I usually, for the most part, especially with small businesses, is really focusing on operational and financing cash flow. So in its key thing is to identify the cash flow problems early on and deal with them. Okay. And we'll talk about some of those coming up. So what is a good type of cash flow to have? So we have what's called positive cash flow. And what positive cash flow means is that you have more inflow, money coming in, than outflow, money going out, which is the same for us personally. Like you would think about that. We're in a better financial position when we spend less than we make, right? So this means we have money sitting, we have money to put in our savings, we have money to, just in case there's an emergency, right? So it's the same concept in our business. So inflow is where we're talking about the payments in our business that we're receiving from what we've made for our sales. Okay. Having a lot of sales is really great, but having a lot of sales doesn't necessarily translate to a lot of cash, because your sales don't always convert to cash immediately, right? So if you're giving, and what I mean by that is you're giving your client, maybe you give them 15 days, 30 days, 60 days to pay their invoices. Well, you're recognizing this sale, but yet the cash is not coming in for some time. So you have to be very aware of that difference in time and what that's going to mean for your business and the running of your business, okay? And because we're not getting that cash flow in immediately, we have those delays, and if we let it go too long, we're going to wind up experiencing a cash flow crunch, right? When we're kind of, we're scrambling because we're like, okay, who's not paid me? I got to do my collections. Where's my money? Where's my money? And we want to avoid this. So when we're dealing with our cash flow, we want to be making sure that we are staying at top, especially on that inflow coming in. Okay. Outflow is, all the money that we are spending on our business. So I'm talking everything, our direct costs, our operating costs, paying down our debt, paying our sales tax, anything that's requiring us to send money out is obviously our outflow. At the end of the day, we would love to have less out, more in. Okay. So it's really as simple as that. So, and we have to consider then, if things start getting tight, how do we increase the cash flow we have? Because there's only so much sales. If you've made all these sales, well, once people pay, people have paid. So how do we keep money, money coming in? And one of the ways that we can, the way we can increase our cash flow is by increasing our profit margins. Okay. And I say that like it's an easy thing, and I know it's not. And if you want, what your profit margin is, if you're not sure, is basically it's the difference between all the money that's coming in and all the money that is going out. All right, there's a calculation for it. There's a percentage, and you want to see that to make sure that, again, like I said, that the money coming in exceeds the money coming out. So there's a couple ways, and what we will do is, I'm going to go into that in a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but we'll talk about some of the ways that we can improve our profit margins. Okay. Now, sometimes you have industry trends for your profit margins. So for example, you might not be able to raise prices beyond a certain amount because the industry that you're in, maybe it's quite common, to have very high costs for your products. Okay. And then of course we have situations where, like we're in right now, like we've been in right now with the pandemic, where it's really hard to raise prices, because you can see how prices are being raised all over the place. And it's not, for the most part, it's not really because people want to just make money, but now they have to offset their own costs. So it's this massive trickle down effect that we have to now look at our businesses and figure out, okay, how are we going to maintain our cash flow? All right. And then of course, it's really important to keep those reserves, whatever you can, to keep some reserves. As I said, this contingent, that's your contingency plan. Sorry about that. And have some reserves on hand for when you do hit those cash crunches. And then, and I don't think I have to tell it, but I will say it just like it's on the screen. Cash flow is essential for your business's survival. If you have no cash, it's very hard to survive. You might be able to make it a little while, but it's not sustainable. Okay, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're working really hard on these projects, that these businesses that are our passions, and we want to see them survive. So let's do what we can to make sure we are planning enough that we can see what is happening and things don't kind of really take us by surprise. So what do we do when change comes? This is the big thing, right? This is, the reality is that at any point in time, there could be change, right? And it's not just a pandemic. It could be a massive political disruption that hurts your business. It could be a personal disruption. It's what we're talking about is anything that disrupts your regular business activities and you don't expect it, right? So let's look at it from that perspective. Obviously, 2020 gave us like the worst example of unexpected change for business. And it has kind of thrown, I don't think there's anybody unaffected at this point in business because of the pandemic. But it's important that when you're in business, whether it's a pandemic or a change in a political party for your province, like for here in Ontario, when Doug Ford took over, for example, like he made some big changes. So a lot of things can impact your business activities. So we kind of want to keep plan as best as we can so that we can mitigate the amount of negative impact on us. Let's just go with that. I think that that's probably the best. So we clarified a little bit about cash flow and what that is. We talked a little bit about financial planning and why it's important and what that is. So now when this change hits, whatever it is, what can we do? And what is it doing to you? And the sad reality is often when change comes, it's not a good change. It's usually a change that's going to cause us some problems. And this is why we want to be prepared. I don't think anybody was prepared for the pandemic, but I know that there were businesses that weathered it better than others because in general, they were prepared for some kind of situation that was going to impact their ability to do their business. So it's one of those, let's learn lessons from what's happened so we can kind of get through it a little bit better if something like this happens again. Okay, so this disruption, it will affect us all at some point in our businesses. And so we want to have whatever plan we have in place, or even just an idea of how we can pivot our business if something dramatic does happen. Okay, so how do we plan for this, and how do we, more importantly, plan through it? Okay, so the first thing it's important to do is assess what is going on and what is changing around you, because it's not that, oh my gosh, there's all of a sudden there's this awful situation that's happened. We don't want to just jump ship. Let's stop and let's assess, okay, how is this actually going to affect us? How is this going to affect my business? So as you can see, I've got here, what happened and what impacted you directly, right? And for many of us, we're in many different types of businesses. Many of us were affected very differently, okay? So I'll give you an example. So we all know that so many of us, many businesses I've worked with, many friends that own restaurants were impacted dramatically. Like it's just, it was awful, right? What we saw that happened. But then if you look at some types of businesses, and I can even say in the accounting profession, I have colleagues that are, tax preparers, colleagues that are bookkeepers, and they actually got busier. Because once the government stepped in and said, okay, we want to help everyone, but we're going to give all the subsidies. Most businesses are like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to apply for this. So now we were reaching out to the accounting professionals, and so they actually became busier. So it's interesting how these massive changes can affect us, very, very differently. So a couple other things how does it impact what you're selling? or the service you're providing, right? So this is something you have to think, okay, if this happened to me, what would that mean to what I'm selling right now? I have a good example of somebody I worked with that their focus was very specific to a very specific type of customer. And this customer all their customers happened to be a part of government. Okay, so this is where we saw a political change several years ago. For example, when our Ontario government changed, when Doug Ford came in and lots of changes happened there. So you could see a lot of changes in terms of government contracts. So when we have people that are, let's say, putting all their eggs, that you use the term putting all your eggs in one basket, well, that was devastating to some people, when contracts were changed and contracts were pulled. So, but that didn't affect the majority of the rest of us, right? But it was a political change that impacted them incredibly. Okay, to the point where they had to say, well, this impacts what we're selling and the service we're providing, because we're like, is anybody else going to buy this, right? So it's one of those things that made them stop and have to reevaluate everything that they have done. And this happened to numerous businesses that I've seen over the years. So this is why it's not always a pandemic. It's a changing government. It's something else that's going to happen. So we want to make sure that we're prepared. And then can we continue? So if whatever this change does to us, will it allow us to continue? So there's a couple of things. Well, the accountants, they're continuing on, tickety boo. They're helping. The restaurants, they can't continue in the way they did. So they certainly have to adapt. Massive change to, if your clients canceled all these contracts, well, no, you can't continue because you have no more work to do. So again, you have to adapt. So how do we then, shift what we're doing? Can we shift what we're doing? Is it even possible? Is it possible to change what we're selling or how we're selling it to deal with this massive impact? And then, of course, how does this change your financial plan? Well, I think it just threw a lot of them out the window for many people. And especially, I'm speaking of specifically right now with 2020, and it's time to rework them. And this is where it comes back to what I said, is that a financial plan is not something that you set and forget. It's something that you monitor. And this is something that it will unequivocally affect your financial plan. Sorry, I'm having a word moment here. And you have to now go back and look back, even back to the point of your strategic plan, to see, okay, am I still going to keep doing this? Are these goals still something what I'm going to be able to achieve, or what I want to achieve? How did this pandemic now push this? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that going on as well. And then, does the change, again, like I said, does it mean you have to create a new product? Can your current product be restructured? And we saw that, we saw that coming, and I was really impressed, when we saw this transition of businesses, restaurants in particularly, that did that amazing pivot and became these, you can pick up, we'll deliver, because they have these commercial spaces. They're like, well, we still have to pay our rent. We still have to do these things, but how can we help people and still get them, our great food, and we can still keep our business running, right? So this is that. I saw that happening so much, and I saw that with other stores like tour stores and bookstores, and people saying, look, no, I'm not throwing in the towel. The need for what I have doesn't change, but how I have to how I'm going to deliver it does. So these are all sorts of things that the change has impact. And then, of course, you got to start assessing that cash flow. Can it tide you over if it takes you a little bit to figure it out? And it's going to take, none of us were all like jumped on the bat and ready to go to when things kind of shut down back in March. It took us a little bit of time. So how's that cash flow of yours? Are you able to weather it a little bit? Can you, if it took you 3, 4, 6 weeks to kind of figure things out, was the cash flow enough, or would it be enough if something happened in the future, right? So before you kind of make all of these decisions, you really have to, this all has to be figured out for you, right? You don't want to go making all these, these dramatic changes. You want to work through this, rework through your plans, see how this is going to impact you and see how it could potentially work, right? So, and again, contingency planning. So this change comes, we look back at our financial planning, we look back at our strategic planning, we look at our cash flow and really evaluate how we can adjust, how we can adapt, and how we can even continue. So, and hopefully that's something that, we can be ready for this if this happens again to us or some other massive change happens to us. So one of the things that we talk about, and I kind of briefly mentioned it, was, reevaluating, right? We want to reevaluate our products. We want to reevaluate our pricing and our sales. And so when this change happens, go back to that list, go back to that financial plan, and let's relook at this. Let's relook at our financial plan and look at those goals again that we had set for ourselves. Look at the action plans we had in place to getting to achieving these goals and how we might have to change the financials associated with them to deal with this. Okay, so we need to reevaluate. All right, we need to go back and see what do we have to change. And if you see, I've got here, do we need to change the pricing of our product and our service? And that's a big one. Okay, so we're not the only ones that are considering reevaluating our prices. We've seen it. We've seen it going to the grocery store. We've seen it going anywhere. Prices are going up. And why are they going up? Because their costs from their purchasing or their production costs are also starting to go up. So we're seeing that trickle down effect. So now you might have to do the same thing to your customers to make sure that you have that, as much as your expenses go up, your cash flow can go up as well. So then our profit margins are still staying healthy. Okay, so we can still have that positive cash flow to keep the businesses going. But you want to determine first, do you even need to change the pricing? Okay, so you want to make sure that those profit margins need to increase in order to increase your cash flow. So then how do we increase those profit margins? Well, so many things affect your profit margin, your revenue, all of your costs, direct and operational, I briefly mentioned before. And if you think about it, there's really only two ways that you can increase your profit margin. Either you increase your net sales or you decrease your costs, right? So during the specific change that you are in, which one can you do? So that's what you got to think about, right? So a lot of us right now, it's costs are high. It might not be possible to reduce your costs, right? Sales, how much is the marketplace going to be forgiving if you increase your sales? How many customers are going to be able to continue to purchase those sales of yours? So those are things that you really need to consider. So, and to change the sales, you have to either sell more, which is of course, or you have to charge more. Right. So again, look at your product. It's kind of hard I'm trying to make this consistent for everyone across the board, but depending on what you're actually doing, how you're going to manage this will be different. So what you do, what you sell, all of that is going to make an impact on how you continue with this. So if you're experiencing an increase in costs, for example, because your suppliers, they have increased them and then they're going to increase their pricing to you, raising your pricing might be the only option. Okay, so sometimes, the dangerous part is when we can't actually increase the specific sales amount and we can't stop the outflow of the cost. This is where we get into a dangerous situation with our cash flow. So this is the only other option, is to sell more. So if you think about this, do we have to what about removing a pivotal product, right? Or a service? Does that impact your bottom line? So if this change is required, saying that nobody's buying X anymore because of what's happened, well, then if that's a major part of your earnings, how is that going to impact you? Can you replace it with something else, or is it going to be detrimental to your whole business, right? What products and services can stay, and what must go to adapt. So we're all adapting here, right? We're all trying to do the best we can. and then are your goals still the same, or have your priorities changed? Well, I think for a lot of us, our priorities changed a bit in with the current situation here in 2020, but our desire as entrepreneurs and as business owners, I don't think that changed very much. We still want our businesses to be successful. We still want to work it through. So let's figure out how do we do this? And when it comes to reevaluating and changing the pricing of your products or services, it's something you really have to sit down and work through. And the one way that I recommend people working through that is look at where your financials sit currently. What are those direct costs that are associated with your sales? What have they been? Where do your operational costs sit? Are there operational costs that you could get rid of? Were you considering a secondary space, and now you're thinking, well, you know what, I can make do with my basement for now, right? So it's really evaluating all the things that could impact that profit margin. So everything, reevaluate, you're going to watch those expenditures. You're going to watch that, do you have the insurance? Are you paying too much insurance? Everything like that. So, and then when it comes to pricing your product, you want to be looking back to way back when you started your business and you did all that research to figure out, well, what can I charge anyway for what I want to sell? What can I charge for this service that I am providing? You almost have to do that a little bit again, because now you're thinking, okay, so the climate has changed. Maybe my customer base has changed a little bit. So what is the market saying about this product or service that I'm selling? Can I still charge the same? Or maybe you need to find a different client base for what you're selling. Maybe it's time to move on to a different client base with a slight change of your product. So while you're still investigating, the ability on what the market's going to pay, what your competitors are doing, you really need to evaluate what your costs are to do so, because that's going to directly impact how you price that particular product or service, because you want to make sure that you are earning enough to cover those costs. Obviously, you'd love to be profitable, right? Because you want to make sure that keeps the cash flow coming in so the business is sustaining. Okay. I know that's a lot, so hopefully if there's any questions, I haven't seen any come in yet, so hopefully everybody, this is making sense, and if not, please pop a question in there and I am happy to answer it. So when we look at here, now it's time, we've kind of touched on this throughout the whole conversation. So what about a strategy pivot? So what if we look at our original business strategy and we think, maybe we need to change what we're doing. Maybe we need to change it. Maybe we were too focused on this type of client, and it's dangerous for us. We've now experienced that it's really hurt us because we didn't diversify enough, right? Maybe with your goals have changed. Maybe you've realized, what, I don't need that space, or I don't need those people, or I can implement certain efficiencies so I can do more with less, right? So maybe these goals are changing. So it's time to come back, go back to that strategic plan that you've had for your business, and you want to start rethinking it, and you want to start making sure, are those original business ideas, business goals still valid for you right now? So, and then obviously this comes in that now we've got, how does this impact our financial planning? Hopefully for the better, that's kind of the point. But it could still stay the same. We don't want it to really get too much higher, but maybe with this reevaluation of our strategic plan, we can now refocus our money, keep more money in the business. Maybe we can bump up that contingency plan, and then let's change our priorities a little bit on these. I had
Susan, we just have a question on the chat from Bianca. So on cash flow specifically,
sure.
Are there strategies to make your cash flow more stable, or are there ways to plan for this?
Yeah, that's so cash flow, there are, and actually, if it's okay, I have my next slide coming up. I'm going to be talking about some cash flow disruption and how we can, how we can really work when our cash flow is being impacted by these kinds of changes. So what I'll do is I will address that in that slide, if that's okay. I think because it'll flow more with the, I was going to talk about some of that stuff. So let me do that. So Bianca, I'll answer you in a couple of seconds. Okay. So in a few minutes. So when it comes, so as we were saying, so pivoting your strategy is something you want to consider. So if I, again, like I was saying before, is that if I had been originally considering a massive scaling plan, I wanted to grow, buy a warehouse, I want to hire 50 people and add X number of products to my organization, well, maybe I have to scale that back a little bit. Maybe I have to bring that back down to think like, okay, in the current climate, is this realistic? You know, maybe I don't want to rent, maybe I want to buy property. You know, maybe I want to, how can I do this with 25 people instead of 50 people, and maybe let's stagger the creation and production of this new product a little bit over, so then it kind of helps me a little bit better, you know, with my cash flow, right? So pivoting your strategy will impact your cash flow. Absolutely. It'll impact it in positive and negative ways. We can't help that. Everything we do is going to be a positive or negative result, right? So, but because pivoting your strategy pivots your financial plan, which then impacts your cash flow. So it's all connected. You can see this nice little connection here. So as we talked about, we're goals. We could be changing our timelines. Like that's another thing too. So if our strategy, you know, is changing what we're doing and when we're going to do it, the timeline for putting a plan in place is going to change, which means it's going to change the financial plan for that timeline as well. So maybe, again, leaving more money in the business, stretching it out a little bit further. Okay, so those are the parts that, you know, this is what is impacted. And then when you change your financial plan, because you've changed your goals, you're changing, you know, you're changing your timelines, you're changing your costs, your cash, your projections, you know, how are all those things, you know, all those things going to be impacted? So I know it sounds, I'm even just saying it, I'm sounding like, yeah, this sounds like a lot of stuff you have to do, but you do need to do this as a business owner. You really want to sit down, because it's awful when these things kind of surprise us, and we can't always plan for a disruption like what's happened, but it would be great if we could all be a little bit better prepared, right? So, and if we look at, you know, how these strategy changes impact our timelines, how they impact the costs, just kind of go through that, reevaluate, and that's not a problem. You know, maybe it's a better thing for you to change, and at the end of the day, it makes your business more sustainable. So take that and then sit down, read it, like go through it for yourself, your whole strategy plan, and see if right now that this is kind of the way you need to pivot to continue your business. And then obviously, like I said, you change your financial plan, it impacts your cash flow. So your income and your revenue there'll be changes. It can increase, it can decrease, right? So it's good, or it could be good or bad, you know, these changes to your strategic plan. You know, there's your, you know, your debt management, right? You know, so if we change our financial plan, maybe we're changing part of the financing that we did in our financial plan, which is going to change our financing cash flow. So which can either mean we have more debt or we have a smaller debt load. Okay, so all of these things are interconnected. So whether we're getting new staff, increased revenue because we decided to add a new product or service launch, you know, our expansion costs, you know, let's say we're going to work from home rather than get that commercial space, right? So, and then when we're thinking about our strategy, we also have to think about our pricing strategy, right? You want to be considering, how am I pricing these things that I'm selling to my customers? Am I doing this in the best way? Because most of us, you know, there's, you know, a fixed price on something, but is there a way I could get people to pay me before I do work? Or could I get them to pay me ongoing, so I'm always getting money coming in? So if you think about, there's that membership mentality. How can we get people to be constantly paying us, you know, for work that's done over a longer period of time, but then the cash flow is always coming in, you know? So some of our industries allow for us to do stuff like this. So if this is a strategy pivot in terms of a pricing model, in terms of your product and service. So you want to really consider that, because again, it all affects everything in terms of financial planning, cash flow planning. So So we've talked about spending patterns. There we go. Cost increases and decreases. So of course, these strategy changes are going to change all of this stuff. Okay. So my last, the last slide I've got here, and what I wanted to talk about, and I will address, I'll address your question, Bianca, in here, because this is where we're going to talk about our cash flow disruption, right? So, and this is that saying, and we've all heard it. It's by an anonymous person. We don't know who said it, but it's one of those that nobody plans to fail. They just fail to plan. And we, you know what? I think everybody's guilty of this. I think we've all done this in some way in our personal lives or a little bit in our businesses, where it's hard to plan for every contingency. It is hard, you know, but we want to do our best to make sure that all of this work that we're going through in our businesses, we're doing our best to make sure it's sustainable, right? This is why we do business plans. This is why we do strategy plans and action plans and financial plans. There's a whole lot of plans here. And we do this because then we have something to, you know, work with as we're growing our business. We have direction when we're growing our business and we're working on our business. So we've created ourselves this guidebook, right? So it allows you, so if we look back in our financial planning again, we're coming back to how it allows you to work through those anticipated sales. We're talking about, again, our seasonality, when people are going to be planning to pay us, right? Because when our cash flow gets disrupted because of these massive changes, we need to figure out what we're going to do, right? So when this timeline changes on the strategic plan, well, now it's probably disrupted when we got a certain product or service out, so which is going to disrupt when the cash is going to start coming in. Okay, we have major project delays. So maybe we had something we were going to launch in October, and based on what's going on, we have to push that launch 3 months, and yet we've put a lot of money out for it. So now we're kind of sitting on debt, or in some cases, I know some people are wind up sitting on a ton of inventory and they've already paid for these things, but yet they can't get the money back into it, right? So we want, when our cash flow gets disrupted, you know, the process to financially, the planning process stays the same, you know, but we have to consider all of these other things, right? So if we look at then, you know, the delays in sales converting to cash, because people are strapped, you know, it's hard for people when there's massive changes. And then you get into now, okay, do I have to now, because my cash flow has been so disrupted, now I have to consider a different type of financing to bridge that gap? What can I consider? And then one of the considerations we actually had this year, you know, was with the government providing all of these subsidies. We had a choice as businesses whether we wanted to apply for some of these subsidies to help us out. But that's, again, making a decision as part of a financial plan, because this is not financing in the typical way. It's not money we have to pay back, but it's money that's income that we have to report. So we still have to, you know, be prepared for the impact of getting that subsidy, you know, or if we're going to get a different type of financing, and what our responsibility, like there was the emergency business account. So that, again, it's a type of financing because it's a long-term, you know, however your bank did a line or credit or credit card, right? So this is financing we now have to plan for. We've got the financing cash flow, but we have to still make sure it's in that financial plan because we have to eventually pay that back, right? Other things we want to be doing when our cash flow is disrupted is we want to make sure that we're stretching our expenditure payments. Like I think I mentioned before, you know, talk to your suppliers. Can you stretch out the payments to 30, 60 days? How are they doing? Especially, you know, larger suppliers might be able to do that more than, you know, your fellow business owner in town, right? So give people a call. One of the things I have learned when it comes to stuff like this is you never know what you're going to be able to get until you actually ask for it. So don't be afraid to ask for it. It doesn't hurt. And then, as I mentioned before in the last slide, was change how you bill your clients. Consider what you're doing and think about, is there a way I can do this differently so my cash flow never stops or at least continues going? And some of the things that we've, in my industry, is over the years, we got into, it was this huge movement to what they called value billing. So people created these packages that included so many things that somebody with this accounting professional was going to do for you. And what it was is, a price was set. So it's not hourly billing. So it's not unexpected. It helps your cash flow, helps our cash flow kind of thing. But it was a fixed price. It was like a flat rate. You paid the exact same thing no matter what that person did for you in the month. So this is thinking when you're like, okay, this keeps cash flow coming in for the accounting professional, because depending on the arrangement they have, they might have months where they do less work and months where they do more work, but the cash flow is consistent. You don't have to worry about it. You've set up a plan for the money to come in. We have a lot of businesses I know have now created memberships where they're offering their services on a membership basis, support services. What they're doing is creating a sustainable cash flow for their sales. So money is constantly coming in, no matter what. They don't have to go chase it. So consider that for yourself when you're looking at, okay, my cash flow is being majorly disrupted. How do I plan now how can I even financially plan when I have no idea what my cash flow is doing? This is what you need to be doing. And when talking with what Bianca had asked here was about cash flows, the strategies to make your cash flow, are there strategies, to make your cash flow more stable? And is there ways to plan for it? So kind of like what I was just saying is, if I'm looking at a strategy, if my business is, say maybe I'm just trying to think of one. If my business is, I want, I have a certain growth plan, I have a certain program I want to be offering, maybe my plan with that is I want to be signing up so many people to this membership, or I want, as a service provider, I'm going to say this is slightly easier, not necessarily, but a service provider, say I want to provide support. And I want to provide support to people ongoing, whether they need me or not. Well, what better way to do that, to get people in to a membership-based service plan? So they pay you the same amount every month, but they might not call you this month, but they might call you 3 times next month and things like that. But again, that money is continually coming in. So this is how you want to stabilize your cash flow. You want to find ways to constantly have a flow of money coming in to your business. Some product sellers do this. So look at those, what is it called? The shave of the month kits. Right? Remember the old days of Columbia House? That was a true membership where they were just sending you stuff and you're paying for that because they've sent it to you and you forgot to say no. So these are ways, now obviously I don't recommend doing that, but it's these are things that you can think of. Is there something that you can do with your product that can encourage people to set up for recurring purchases? It's easier to sell to a current customer than it is to go out and find a new customer. So find what can you do for the people that are your customers right now, and how can you provide more for them? Or something different for them, so that they will then buy more from you. Okay. And then there comes a point too that sometimes you might not be able to sell to that customer anymore. You might not be able to, and you just might have saturated your current client market, and you have to now start thinking out further. So this is where we start planning when if we want to avoid the cash flow disruption is what we're trying to do. So as you can see, the whole overarching thing of all this is that you have to plan for this. Plan, stay on top of it, monitor it, review it. You can come back, you can change it, you can make adjustments to your financial plan. And then in a situation like right now, when things kind of just went really topsy-turvy, maybe it's time to reevaluate that strategic plan and make things, figure out what you can do that could be more sustainable, that can survive a disruption like this again in the future. So hopefully I answered your question, Bianca. If that wasn't clear, let me know. But yeah, so that's kind of it for me. And that was my slide presentation on all of this. It's just after 11 and we have time for some questions if there are any other questions, or if you want me to go back and readdress a particular point, I'm happy to do so. But otherwise, that is how we're going to look how I would recommend you deal with things when we have times of change, and don't always think in terms of if we go into a second lockdown. It might not necessarily be that particular change. Watch when you're considering the type of clients that you're going to be selling to, what could disrupt them from buying from you. Just kind of put yourself in their position. What could hurt them? What could hurt that individual consumer? Or if you are selling to government agencies, what could cause a problem for you there? Political change, right? Obviously, if you're selling to the general public, this pandemic really impacted us dramatically. So that would really make a change, right? So there are other things that could impact you, and you want to make sure that you can make that pivot so that you can still have money coming in, so your business can still operate. So, but thank you all very much for joining me. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. And like I said, if you have any questions, please post them. If not, if something comes up later on, you can connect with me. Here's my information to connect with me if you have a further question, or I'm sure Erica can connect with me if you go through her. So I just wanted to say thank you. Erica, you still?
Yeah, I'm there. Thank you, Susan. That is great. Such great content, and a really methodical way you went through the key buckets and laid it out. We have a few people saying thank you on the line. I'm not sure if anybody has a specific question. You can either take yourself off mute, or you could type it into the chat feature. I don't see any popping up just yet. I see a lot of thank yous. So I take that as it was very insightful, and I think it was. I learned a lot.
Oh, I'm glad. That's good. That's my main purpose, is that I know sometimes that this kind of information is a little bit much, when we sit and we think and like, oh my gosh, eyes glazed over, I just want to sell this. I just want to do this. But the purpose of it really is so that you can sell this or do that, and you can do it for a long time, and you can be sustainable. So it's not the most fun thing we do in our business, unless you're like me and this is your business and I love doing it. But it's not the most fun thing, but it is a really important thing. You might feel like now it's like, oh, why do I have to bother doing this? But just trust me, the people that did have a plan in place are the ones that pushed through the lockdown. Those are the companies that we saw. And sometimes there's some things we can't avoid, even if we have a plan. It's like nobody's fault, but we are more likely to weather the storm if you're prepared.
For sure.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's just a lot of stuff that I know when I'm in I can't see any of them, but I know when I'm in a classroom, sometimes I get the glazed eyes, and so I understand that it's a lot, but it's just to try to help you all just think in a different way about your business as you're going through, because it would be nice to see all of you be successful and continue to grow and get your business to where you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. I just had a question sent to me around services being offered through DELIA. Are they available to everyone if people are not taking the DELIA loan? So yes, definitely. Like this session today was sponsored by DELIA. We were able to put it on because of the DELIA program, but it was open to anybody to attend. Also, in terms of Northumberland CFDC, we're located in Venture 13, which is an Eastern Ontario Innovation Center. So a lot of the programming coming out is on behalf of both of us. So all that programming is available to all, and we bring in mentors monthly. So, if you loved hearing from Susan and you want to follow up and have some more conversation, that's something we would fund. Is we could set up some virtual time with Susan, depending on everyone's schedule, and DELIA could fund that, or Northumberland CFDC. And we rotate mentors depending on, what people are looking for, and make sure we have a variety across different services. So to answer the question, yes, all these wraparound services are available if you do not need that specific DELIA loan, for sure.
It's so great. It's so great that you guys offer that. It's one of the things that um, it's been really inspiring, you know, working along with you guys for many, many years and seeing all the programs that the NCFDC has offered out of Venture 13, and even just having the Venture 13 area. It's just, if anybody needs it, it's definitely the place to go to get that support. And it really is fantastic. And it's nice to see that kind of an organization out there supporting our businesses. So
Thank you. We appreciate that, and that is definitely our goal. And we appreciate you having yourself, Susan, as a partner. And thank you for taking the time this morning to take us through this. I think it was very insightful information. And as mentioned, it is recorded, so I will get that up by the end of the week, and I'll make sure that to the attendees on the line, I send out an email with that link. And yes, as Susan mentioned, you can reach out to her or myself, and I'm happy to point anybody in any direction. And yes, I think I want to thank everyone for being on the line, and especially Susan. And I think we will wrap it up for
sounds
today.
good. All right. Well, thank you, God. Thank you, everybody, again, and have a wonderful rest of the day, and good luck with your business venture.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye now.